You're watching Fugitive Red-Eye, and welcome to another episode of Overanalyzing, the series where I take an in-depth look at the series which I love. In today's episode, I'll be talking about Fist of the North Star, which is a fantastic anime and is probably my favorite fighting anime series. It's a toss-up between that and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, both of which are really good. But today I'm going to talk about something that can drive you insane if you've watched Fist of the North Star, and especially Fist of the North Star 2. Now, Fist of the North Star 2 is the second anime series, as the title would imply, but it's often just lumped together with Fist of the North Star 1, just to consider it all the original Fist of the North Star series. Which is also, honestly, kind of how I view it. I typically refer to Fist of the North Star 2 as the second season, although technically that's not correct. But that said, we'll go ahead and talk about today's topic, which is Kenshiro's backstory, or more to the point, the backstory of the Divine Fist of the North Star itself, or the Brothers of the North Star and the North Star Clan. Keep in mind, I'm recording this video probably 2 or 3 months after I finished Fist of the North Star, maybe slightly more, slightly less, somewhere around there though. It has been a couple of months since I've watched through Fist of the North Star, and specifically I'm saying that's when I finished Fist of the North Star 2. The original Fist of the North Star I started watching over a year ago, and then I worked my way through it, and I kind of watched it in bits, so it's not like I have all of this knowledge right here in my mind fresh. So I'm going completely off memory, so if there are any inaccuracies with what I say, please feel free to point them out in the comments, because I'm not going to go back and watch it just to make this video. I'm going to go back and watch the series again eventually, but that's 152 episodes, which I just got done watching a couple months ago, so it's already still relatively fresh in my mind, but if I get any inaccuracies, I apologize. I'll also point out I have not read the manga, so I don't know how that factors in. I don't know how the story gets played out in the manga itself. I have seen the first episode of New Fist of the North Star, but I have not seen episodes 2 or 3 of that yet, but that will not factor into this. So let's go ahead and talk about Divine Fist of the North Star, or Hokuto Shinken, which directly translates to Divine Fist of the Big Dipper. Hokuto Shinken, or Divine Fist of the North Star, is an ancient 2,000-year-old fighting style, which has one inheritor every generation. Basically, whenever the previous inheritor dies, the next one gets it. So they're constantly training their successor. Well, since it has one successor per lifetime, Kenshiro is that successor, and he makes it very clear that there's only one person who knows Divine Fist of the North Star. At least that's the implication he gives. But obviously later on you find out he's not the only one who knows it, he's just the only rightful successor. Because later on, it introduces the concept that he has 3 quote-unquote brothers, which were all adopted by Ryukin, his master, and his 3 brothers trained with him. Those are Rao, Toki, and Jagi. With Rao being the oldest, Toki being the second oldest, and Jagi being the third oldest, and Kenshiro being the youngest. Kenshiro himself was chosen to be the successor to the Divine Fist of the North Star. And the way that works is, even though the others learn it, they have 2 choices when someone else has picked successor. They can either give up fighting willingly and use their abilities for other methods, like Toki decided to do with medicine, or they can have their fists forcibly sealed so they are unable to use Divine Fist of the North Star anymore. Of course, this is what was supposed to happen to Rao, but Rao killed Ryukin and prevented that from happening. So throughout Kenshiro's training, in his original flashbacks, it always shows him at a young age training with Rao, and Toki at a young age, as well as Jagi, training with Ryukin in the arts of the North Star. And as time goes by, obviously he's named successor and all that. Later on, though, in flashbacks, you find out that Toki and Rao are not only brothers in the sense that they all are, but they're actually blood-related brothers who, after their parents die, went to find Ryukin and get taken in by him and trained by him. Ryukin originally only says he'll take in one of them, but due to Rao's resolve, and where Rao will not let Ryukin kill one of them, because he does try to do that. He throws Toki off a cliff and Rao prevents him from dying. He decides due to Rao's resolve, he'll take them both in, but he makes it clear only one of them can be successor. This doesn't make sense how he was willing to take in Jagi and Kenshiro, because it's kind of implied that Jagi and Kenshiro were brought in later, obviously, because they were younger, and at this time he was only taking in one person because he wanted one successor. But it is unexplained exactly when or why he takes in Kenshiro and Jagi. Kenshiro will get to a little bit more explanation later on, but you never actually see a scene where it shows when he met Ryukin. That said, Jagi does not get any backstory about that whatsoever, because nobody likes Joggy, and nobody gives a shit about Joggy, which is why he's kind of an irrelevant character. He's just kind of the fourth forgotten brother, and I'm thinking about doing a video all about Joggy later on, because I think it's kind of funny how he's just kind of the forgotten North Star brother, because everyone talks about, oh, the three brothers of the North Star, but it's like, Joggy was there too. Not that I think that that's a bad thing, because Joggy is definitely the least likable of the four, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. So, along his training and being brought up, Kenshiro and the other North Star brothers also all met Yuria, who I think was within the South Star training grounds and stuff like that, because obviously later on she's revealed to be the final general of the South Star. Obviously they trained kind of alongside with the South Star, having sort of a friendly rivalry back and forth, which is how they meet Shin and all those others. Small side note, pretty much every prominent character's backstory ties back to Yuria in one way or another. There's a couple of exceptions, but for the most part, everybody's story has, oh, they fell in love with Yuria and their life changed forever, and that's their entire backstory. I'm not saying that that's an inconsistency, it's just an astonishing coincidence that literally everyone from all over the place have some backstory tied back to Yuria. And I don't think that that's a bad thing either. I think it works well in the plot. I just think it's kind of funny to look at like that. So later on, you see more and more backstory get developed. You get to see, Rao and Toki as they left, and after their mother died and their father died, and they go and find Ryukin, stuff like that. All of that's fine and dandy and adds up really well, and Kenshiro's just kind of left a mystery how he got there. But then we get Fist of the North Star 2. Now, Fist of the North Star 2 is the last 43 anime episodes of the original Fist of the North Star run. Obviously, like I said, Fist of the North Star 2 was a sequel series. And it's not as good as Fist of the North Star 1. I still like it a lot. I still love Fist of the North Star 2. But the inconsistencies definitely bog it down, and that's what we're going to get into now. So in Fist of the North Star 2, you are introduced to a concept called the Land of Ashura. In the Land of Ashura, that's where Kenshiro was born. And had it just been left at Kenshiro and Kenshiro alone in the Land of Ashura and all that, I would have been all for it, because I like this origin story. Kenshiro has an older brother there named Hyo, who loved Kenshiro and took care of him. However, turmoil came in the Land of Ashura, and all sorts of problems and conflicts were arising, so they decided it's best to get Kenshiro out of there. For whatever reason, they don't see it fit to send Hyo out of there. I think it's because Hyo was training in Hokuto Ryukin, which is sort of a counterpart to Kenshiro's Hokuto Shinken, and Hokuto Ryukin is typically translated as North Star Lapis Lazuli Fist. They don't send Hyo, Kenshiro's older brother, with him, but somehow Toki and Rao were in the Land of Ashura, and this is presumably before they got in with Ryukin, because Ryukin took them in after their parents died, is what you thought. But then you find out, no, Rao's mother died forever ago in the Land of Ashura, which is why his brother Kaio becomes the villain of Fist of the North Star 2, because of his mother's death. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because I'm pretty sure Rao is shown visiting his mother's grave on the mainland, but it's also in the Land of Ashura. Not to mention the fact that, okay, so their mother died then, and then they left for the mainland. Now, maybe going for the mainland is when they went to meet Ryukin. But originally, they were not shown to have Kenshiro with them, and I doubt that Ryukin would have wanted to take in another one, a third one. Granted, Kenshiro was a baby, but again, Kenshiro was very clearly not with them in the original flashbacks that introduced them, that gave Rao and Toki their backstory with Ryukin. But for some reason, Kenshiro goes with them, or they take Kenshiro with them, and then presumably sometime later they get taken in by Ryukin. Okay, well, that adds a lot of questions, like, where was Kenshiro this whole time? If they had him with them when they left? Why was Hyo not fit to go? And many others. And this one's not as important, but here's a small side note. Toki's hair color in the original flashbacks is inconsistent. Originally, Toki was portrayed to have black hair up until a nuclear explosion turned his hair white. That nuclear explosion, of course, turned his hair white as an adult. However, and whenever he's shown as a child in Fist of the North Star 1, he has black hair. However, in Fist of the North Star 2 in these flashbacks, he has white hair, as he does as an adult, which does not make any sense. Again, that's a very minor nitpick, but it is an inconsistency nonetheless. Another major inconsistency is it's very unclear when the apocalypse happened, and I don't mean just which year. I mean, was it during their lifetime or was it long before their lifetime? There's evidence to suggest both. because they act like society's been destroyed for hundreds, if not thousands of years, but then other times they act like the world was normal when they were kids, and then it became like that as they were adults. It's very unclear, and they don't do a very good job explaining that. Also, if they left with Kenshiro, again, where does Joggy factor into this? Again, I know Joggy's just kind of the forgotten one, but when did Ryukin take Joggy in? Because again, I had the impression that Joggy was taken in before Kenshiro. But if Kenshiro was with Rao and Toki the whole time, then that can't have been the case. On top of that, they give this whole big backstory of how the North Star tribe was like at war with itself between the Hokuto Ryukin and Hokuto Shinken, which is why, again, Kenshiro was taken out of the land of Ashura. But on top of that, Kaio has a younger sister. Now, that younger sister was Hyo's fiance. Now, if Kaio has a younger sister, that would make her Rao and Toki's younger sister, or possibly older sister as well. I'm not 100% sure, because it's not exactly clear where she factors in with them. I'm gonna assume she's their younger sister, but if that's the case, when was she had? Because she's not shown in any of the flashbacks, even in Fist of the North Star 2. Like, even when Rao and Toki are leaving the land of Ashura, their sister is not shown at all. So it's like, what the hell? Later on, you're also introduced to a character named Black Yaksha, who is supposed to be like Kenshiro's like guardian who watches over him. But Yaksha stayed in the land of Ashura and doesn't show up until his battle with Hyo. And then as he's fighting Hyo, he's like, yeah, I was supposed to protect you your whole life. Here I am. I'm important. And then he dies, like, literally 2 episodes later. And he also was like, you know, okay, where the hell were you Kenshiro's entire life? What the fuck? Another side note that I do want to mention is I think that they just kept coming up with different stars to, have new fighting styles. Because, again, originally there was the North Star and the South Star. That was cool. Granted, North Star, like I said, was technically Big Dipper. South Star, I think, was, like, Secondary Dipper or something like that. I'm not 100% sure because I don't speak Japanese and I haven't looked up the direct translation for that. But then there was Fist of the Source Star, which is the actual Fist of the North Star. They actually brought that in later. And then there's North Star Lapis Lazuli Fist. So it's like, it gets a mess with that too. But again, that's a whole other tangent. Those are the main points that I think just make Kenshiro's backstory a mess. There's plenty of other things there. But those are the main ones, is it doesn't make a whole lot of sense exactly how, Kenshiro, Rao, and Toki left, and then Kenshiro just wasn't with them, and then just magically ended up with Ryukin years later, presumably. Or maybe Ryukin took him in and he was there, and they just didn't mention it, but again, doesn't make any sense, because he wasn't shown with them, they made no mention of him, and again, Ryukin only wanted to take in one of the 2, let alone a 3rd. Not to mention, again, I had the implication that Joggy was taken in before Kenshiro, so again, all sorts of stuff that makes it inconsistent as hell. Toki's hair color's an inconsistency, obviously. Rao and Toki having a little sister that's just, like, never brought up until Fist of the North Star 2, and I doubt they even knew about, which doesn't make any goddamn sense, because, again, their mother died long before they left. Which, again, also makes no sense, because her grave is also on the mainland. So it's very confusing and hard to follow. But regardless, that's how it goes. Now, maybe you could argue that Ryukin was also in the land of Ashura, and that's when they met up with him, was in the land of Ashura. Okay, maybe, but if that's the case, why was he not shown leaving the land of Ashura with them? And where the hell were they going when they were leaving for the mainland? Unless Ryukin had presumably left before. But if that's the case, why did they not leave when he did, if he had already adopted them and taken them in? It's like, you can try your best to explain this by coming up with explanations like that, but even then, it's kind of a stretch. It's just a mess. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Kenshiro's backstory, and more to the point, Rao and Toki's backstory. That's really where it's at. But a lot of people give Araki shit for forgetting stuff. But what about Baronson forgets, yeah? Baronson forgets a lot of stuff, it seems. I said the same thing about Akira Toriyama when it comes to Dragon Ball, but the ones in Dragon Ball aren't as glaring as this backstory one. I mean, some of them are, but... And I think Dragon Ball overall has more, but Fist of the North Star's inconsistencies can be very frustrating. Anyway, this has been Fugitive Red Eye, and let me know what you think in the comments below. Have a great rest of the day.
Subscribe to Fugitive Red Eye.